Ladies and gents, this is ML's Like Team Spirit. Today I've got Tony with me. Tony, welcome back.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
Tony, the AI pioneer. You were with me last year, one of my early calls. You were using AI before anyone even knew what a language model was. Tony, this is like a reverse therapy session. I need your help.
I'm up for it. Let's do it.
Talk to me. This is my problem. I've worked in CRM and data-driven marketing for over 20 years now. And I'm always excited by what marketing can do in terms of creating more engagement, meeting customers' needs, generally exciting customers about the products. There's the other side to it too. What marketing can also do is sometimes negative. So can increase opt-outs, irritate the consumers, these sorts of things. And I'm sometimes caught in the crossfire between my wish of like, how do we have more engagement and list management? But you've got a bit of a solution for this. How do you handle it when you want to turn the dial up and have more marketing communications, but not upset the consumers? What can we do?
It's a balancing act because obviously you have to make sure you kind of protect your audience, right? So I think you first of all have to be brave enough to actually try it. So many people sit and look at a successfully performing CRM program and go, let's just keep it. We talk to people once a month, once a week, bi-weekly, whatever it is, and that works for us. So let's not, upset the status quo. So you've got to be brave enough to say, actually, I want to do something differently and I want to see some improvement. For me, I've done it a few times, and I think I've done it with you as well. In that testing is the most important thing. So you can't just dump in and say, we're going to 8 times, 10 times, 3 times the level of communication to our entire customer base overnight, because one, you're going to upset and terrify every single senior lead, director, C-suite person in your company. You also might impact things like spam traps and your deliverability and your reputation with different ISPs. So you really kind of need to make sure that you test your strategy and your approach on like a subset audience first before you ramp it up to everyone. I've done it before where, we just kind of take like 10% of our audience, try and kind of make it as much of a microcosm as you can, so that you have, a rough, identical segment of your entire customer base, and work on them first. So, start small and then grow and leverage it as you sort of start to see results that you hope are favorable, but don't give up when you get a negative result. I think it's kind of the first thing I would say.
Very kind of you to think of the management. Yeah, I suppose they want predictable performance and so on and so forth. And probably in the next breath, they're like, can we put your projection up by 10% this year? So this is that sticky bit of like, well, how do you do it? So the temptation can be make existing campaigns better.
Yeah.
But with the best will in the world, you need to really turn the screw on existing campaigns to drive a serious change. Frequency is one way to really create a massive uptick, but is a little bit scary. So talk us through this sort of 10% idea. And I don't know what things what would you do? What does it take in your marketing platform? And like, what would you be measuring, and over what duration? It seems like you're sort of trying to say test a little bit so that you get the answers that you need. How does it work for you?
So it's got to be statistically viable. So, there's no point doing a test over a week or over 2 weeks, but depending on your volume. If you're a company that's sending emails every day, a couple of times a day, then, your testing period can be much shorter because you're going to be gleaning insights on a daily basis. If you're a company that potentially doesn't have as larger kind of send volume, so you might be sending every week or every 2 weeks, then extend that testing period. There's no like gold standard. For me, when I've done it in the past, I've done it over 10, 12 weeks to make sure that we gather enough insight and we have multiple sends and multiple kind of variations of those sends with different types of content within them, that we kind of get a solid understanding of what is working for our customer base. So in the past, as I say, I've kind of looked at about a 10% audience that we can test on, and significantly ramped up the volume. So I've done it before. I mentioned it a second ago, 8 times the volume. So gone from talking to customers every couple of months to having a weekly conversation with them. But to do that overnight obviously can pose a risk. So we grabbed our sort of 10% audience, and we started talking to them every single week, industry-specific news, anything that's relevant to them. And we started to churn that out from Marketing Cloud we used. the most important thing is having a really kind of keen and regular eye on the metrics. So open rate, click rate, unsubscribe, sender deliverability, etc., sender reputation, because those are the kind of key indicators that will highlight positive or negative performance, and allow you to kind of tweak your test, or reduce, increase volume, and even look to differentiate the audience after the test has kind of occurred.
Do you remember how often you would speak to management about progress, just out of interest?
Yeah. So this depends on how engaged your senior team are with CRM. I've been lucky enough to work kind of under teams that have got super kind of CRM focused leaders. And so I would be talking to them weekly, if not more than that, just kind of keeping them in the loop, because I think the most important thing you can do is kind of have that strategic relationship built where they understand that things take time. There's not always immediate wins or immediate losses, and to appreciate that you're going to get ebbs and flows when you're testing. So I would say, keep senior leadership in the loop as often as you can. Anytime you've got anything that's statistically interesting, keep them in the loop, tell them, and then just have a kind of a regular check-in with them so they're kind of aware of the progress of the test and the results of it as well.
Take this case where it was 8 times the frequency. Like, do you remember what happened on the unsubscribe side? Like, was it worse?
Yes. Yeah, I think we actually saw unsubscribe drop down, because they have that your emails start to have that resonance with them and that routine. So people like routine, and this kind of always goes back to the targeting. If you're targeting people that are customers, for example, they're engaged rather than just signups. I'm a firm believer that the more you speak to them, the less likely they are to switch off from you as a brand. If they are, a one-time purchaser and you email them every couple of months, they're more likely to be a bit frustrated with that one ad hoc out of the blue message. And so you're probably going to see unsubscribes a little bit higher because they're like, why do I never hear from this brand? Why are you talking to me now? Don't care, not interested. But if you have that regular level of communication with them, we found, in this kind of particular case, the unsubscribes actually dropped the more we spoke to people, because one, they were expecting the content. It wasn't a surprise to see an email from X brand. And two, the content was so varied, and the range of kind of information was so different, that they weren't just getting the same information. It was interesting to them. It was informative and it was engaging. So yes, we saw unsubscribes, and actually at the start of the test, we did see unsubscribes increase a little bit. But that's the kind of the bravery aspect of it and the fear. You have to kind of say, look, we're going to get some rough through this because we are massively changing how we're talking to people. So accept that people are going to drop out. And those are the people that, you don't ignore from your brand, but you almost have them on like a low intensity or a low engagement list. So you treat them to the big brand moments rather than the regular kind of nitty gritty, more regular communications. But once you've sort of weeded out that level of people that aren't interested in you as a brand, you'll see unsubscribes drop because you're having a regular communication with them. So I always kind of have the metaphor of it's a conversation with your wife or your partner or your husband. The more you talk to them, the more you understand about them and the more engaging that conversation is. If you just turn around to your wife every week and say, have a quick conversation about what's for dinner, that conversation can be boring and stagnant, and you're going to switch off and you're just going to not bother to have that conversation in the future. So yeah, keep the conversation flowing between customer and brand, and you ultimately see an engagement, skyrocket, hopefully, and unsubscribe drop off.
Yeah, Tony, I love it. Okay, so it's kind of the onus being on the marketer, not that I'm going to do something and there'll be an unsubscribe. The onus is like how to create something valuable so it's compelling, and the unsubscribe just won't happen. So
100%.
Different
and
mindset.
Go through the challenge. Like don't be scared if you see negative stuff at the start, because whenever there's change from people are creatures of habit. Whenever something it changes for them, you're going to get some negative results sometimes. But plow on through it, and that's why you have that testing period at the start, because then you know how people perform. Throughout that entire testing period, that you've got X number of weeks worth of data of unsubscribed started low or started high and then dropped off. Engagement started low and then peaked. So you always you're ahead of the game in terms of when you do want to roll it out to other people.
Tony, I've remembered something that's a tip for everybody watching this. I remember a slide you made, and you would say, here's our unsubscribe rate today. I am going to increase frequency by 8 times. And here is a typical unsubscribe rate for the industry. So you had used a different data point just to create a little bit of expectation that was a buffer. And so in fact, the real opt-out rate was quite low. I suppose if you compare your 8 times strategies to that, someone would scream and say, "Oh no, Tony, it's doubled from 0.1 to 0.2," like, very small absolute values. But if you say, well, look, this is kind of typically how it works, we'll have some collateral damage where we lose some less engaged consumers, but there should be a massive upside for us. I remember the presentation that way, and it kind of created a range, like this is an acceptable range of unsubscribes, so that we don't panic too much. So that worked really well. What other data points are useful? So take this, the test time frame. How did you look at the other side of it, the engagement side? So if you allow it to run for a month, or what's your plan? 12 weeks?
Yeah. So we did a 12-week test, and you look at loads of different data points within the kind of the email ecosystem. So you've got your very basic kind of open rates, click rates, unsubscribes, and they are really good indicators. But when you start to break it down on a subscriber level and look at the number of emails that X subscriber or the average subscriber opens and clicks within a certain period, or how many people open between 1 and 3 and 4 and 7 and 7 and 12 emails, then you start to really kind of gauge how that the value add of that email series or that campaign. Because at the start we were noticing that customers were opening every other email. They might open 1 in 4, they might open a couple a year. But with this kind of test where we ramped up the frequency and the volume so significantly, so quickly, we saw that kind of shift in terms of the frequency of open and the volume of open. And actually, I can't remember exactly what the number was, but it was more than half of people would open 75% of our emails of that nature. And so it's looking at the one level further down than just like opens and clicks, and trying to kind of bracket the audience that you've got in terms of our super responders, our super high engagement, low engagement, mid engagement, and then you can kind of start to tweak and tailor the approach for other campaigns off the back of that as well. So I would kind of always encourage you to look that extra level down, work with the kind of the data team, the BI team, to pull that understanding of I suppose long-term engagement and overall email engagement, rather than on a email by email basis.
Yeah, good. So take it to a customer analysis and look at the distributions of opens and clicks and get a sense of that. Yeah, it's really good. I mean, I remember
that product as well. Sorry, just on top of it, you also get like product understanding as well and product engagement. So the more you speak to customers, obviously, the more product you can push towards them, the more news you can push towards them. So you understand what kind of product is engaging, what people are clicking with, what type of person clicks on what type of content on what type of product. And then that means you can have that hyper relevancy further down the line, because that your super high responders always click on a certain type of product. So tailor that to them and only send it to them. So it just gives you that better understanding of who's clicking what resonates with who, and then how to kind of reduce the audience size for campaigns in the future, which ultimately increases engagement rates.
Tony, if you're trying to get me hyped and excited, you're really succeeding. So you're really creating your own data. So it's often for marketers are like, I don't have enough data to like put them into my campaigns, or enough to profile, or something like this. When it's high frequency and there's all these different types of campaigns, you're really generating a new data source as well, which is really interesting. There's one more I can think of that you didn't mention. So I enjoyed when the main audience came in. So your 10% test audience was running. When the 90% came in, what I really enjoyed looking at is seeing that for the same email, like after the 90% come in for the next 2-3 weeks, you can see the engagement of, well, the 90% haven't been in this high frequency flow, but they're getting email A. Well, and our 10% are getting email A this week also, but actually they're 12 weeks further ahead. And I remember really studying the differential with you to understand, well, this is like a bit of a lead indicator of when the 90% then get to week 12, what will they look like? And we could sort of project future engagement and just really put it into our, I suppose, a projection of just like, well, what kind of upside have we created through doing this 8 times test? Well, Tony, look, thank you for all your insights. We have hit time, I'm afraid to tell you. So congratulations for always doing this, Tony, and being on the side of engagement. Ladies and gents, this has been Emails Like Team Spirit.